Hello everybody, Elijah Williams with Williams Built Blades and Fire Creek Forge for that matter. Today I'm going to do a video for you showing you what I am taking over to Whunga Zimbabwe, to the orphanage over there that is built and maintained by Houses of Hope Africa. That's the organization I'm going over with or working with here. And if any of you guys have seen the first video that I did mentioning this, I'm now a couple days away from flying out and taking a friend with me. We're going to go over there with a couple other guys, one of them being the guy that founded the orphanage or founded HOHA, and it's going to be great, really excited. So to recap, what I'm doing is I'm going to be going over there and setting up a little simple blacksmithing shop. And start teaching the kids blacksmithing and basic knife making. So it's going to be awesome. And why is this important? So Whunga is a remote village in Zimbabwe, which is a very economically depressed country. And there is approximately between 1.5 to 2 million orphans in Zimbabwe alone. And when you're an orphan, you have nothing, pretty much. Including no parents and nobody to teach you something as basic as how to make a living or how to survive. What are your options? Digging through the dump to find a glass bottle or 5 or 6 and clean those and sell them to a vendor who puts something in them and sells it. So you make like $1 a week or whatever. So the idea behind this is to teach these kids, even though they're taken care of in this orphanage here. Obviously, an orphanage, generally speaking, can't keep somebody for the rest of their life, and so they go to school, they're getting an education and that kind of stuff. But there is a need for people who can do basic trade skills and that kind of stuff, and there is a market locally and potentially internationally for products such as knives. So what I'm doing and what my goal is to teach not just kids, but this trip specifically, teach these kids these skills so they can use them to support themselves even now and in the future, and take care of other people. So that's kind of the basic premise behind this, because rock bottom, my desire is to see the gospel of Jesus Christ brought to people. But Christ has told us to take care of widows and orphans, and to feed those who need food and clothe those who need clothing, and this is all part of doing that. So to get to the tool side of it, that's why I'm going. What am I taking to make this happen? So first of all, I want to thank some people. My lovely wife, who has been supportive of me going on this trip for about 20 days. And whatever the future, whatever God brings in the future for this kind of thing, we see this possibly being repeated, and that's kind of my desire and what we're hopeful for. So I appreciate my wife's support very much. I appreciate the people that financially supported this trip, this venture, in the little local fundraiser we had here a while back. Thank you very much. Made this trip possible for me and my friend to get over there. And also, before I forget, they're also building a school. If they haven't started the foundation as I speak, it will be very soon. And so they're building a school at this orphanage site. So that's what the other people on this trip are primarily going to be doing. So anyway, yeah, the people that financially supported this made the trip possible, and also to buy these tools to take over there and set this up and get this going. So this is awesome. So I'm going to show you what I'm taking, because what do you take to set up a basic but functional blacksmith / knife making setup in a area like Whunga, Zimbabwe, which, by the way, it's important to note, does not have electricity. They have a generator that they can run part-time, but we're not going to be relying on electricity at all at this point. So that's important when you make decisions about what to take. So what am I taking? Okay, so here's some tools. And again, because I forgot to mention something, they are going to have the steel to put together, to weld together. They have a independent welder, like a generator type deal, I believe. to weld together a forge, which I'm going to be doing. That's the first thing I'm going to be doing over there. And then there's bricks available. So I'm thinking basically a brick firebox type of a deal in a forge. So that's taken care of. I don't have to put that in a bag and take it over. But this is a hand crank blower from Whitlock's Wood Fired Forge, which you can find them on Facebook, online, all that kind of thing. Purchased this with mission money from the fundraiser. And Whitlock's was kind enough and awesome enough to throw in spare parts, because obviously that's kind of important to have if something breaks. This is a whole separate new gearbox that they threw in for free, which is awesome. I told them what I was doing and all that kind of stuff, and they were more than happy to help out, which is great. 2 extra sets of air fins, which go inside the blower housing here, and it's all taken apart and kind of packed in there, so I don't want to pull the whole thing out, but it's cast aluminum, sturdy, light. It's going to actually be something that I'm going to get myself one here when I get my coal forge set back up eventually someday. So that's awesome. A buddy of mine, really custom leather, he threw in this hand crank grinder, which you know, we're see if we can find a new grinding wheel for it, but it's still got some life left on it, definitely. And this will be really handy for even just like sharpening drill bits and that kind of stuff. Which, if you've practiced that, you know it can be done to where they are serviceable again. But anyway, this will be handy. So again, no electricity available pretty much most of the time. So that's what we got. So, to go through this quickly, because my phone is dying already, tin snips. A lot of what we're going to be working with is scrap metal, and so including sheet metal and like vehicle bodies and that kind of stuff. So that's going to be handy to break stuff down. Hacksaw blades, and let me mention that all of this stuff is mostly what I use, except for like grinders and buffers and that kind of thing. But I've used all this stuff either exclusively in my knife making career, or still do in conjunction with power tools. So this is all stuff that is pertinent. And like I said, it's also with the eye towards no power. So hacksaw, very important, very useful. Pin stock, which I have to cut down to fit in the bag. 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch thick brass rod. Total of 6 feet total of each size there, actually. Steel ruler, this has got a little square, actually it's plastic square kind of thing on there. I don't really care about that, but the steel ruler is super handy and important to have. Excuse me, I have found. Lineman pliers, wire cutter, cut and pin stock, pliering stuff, very useful. Use that kind of thing all the time. Vice grips, who doesn't use these all the time? Use these all the time. You know, twisting stock, taking stuff, holding stuff, taking stuff out of the forge, whatever, what have you. A selection of, a cold chisel, a larger cold chisel that we can use right off the bat. We're going to be making cold chisels, hot chisels and different things like that. But this is going to be handy to have this available right off the bat to bust stuff apart or what have you. That's good. Files. So I've got a couple of 12-inch mill files, 8-inch mill file with a little finer cut, 10-inch half-round bastard cut, pulled, shape knife handles and stuff quickly. Also another half-round to 8-inch smaller, finer cut, a couple of double cut, medium-sized teeth kind of a deal, mill files there. So kind of a variety, because that's going to be super important. When you're forging, obviously, stock removal is not nearly as important, but it still is important when you're doing the profile on your knife and all that, whatever. Files are super important when you don't have power like a grinder and that kind of thing. A horse hoof rasp, which I have used various ones of these extensively in my time, and I still do actually, because if there's any application where you need to hog metal, like, brass or soft metals or wood off quickly, this is very effective and useful. And I've even used it to where, if you need to take the pin stock down on a knife that's sticking out, you don't want to heat up your epoxy in the knife handle. These are super handy to use because you just take material off like none other. You have to be careful that you don't crack stuff because it's a pretty coarse tooth on there. But anyway, very useful. Epoxy. Here's some some of that, and then some JB weld. Not going to be depending on that, but it will be nice once we kind of get through some fundamentals to kind of put together a little tighter setup on a knife handle and that kind of thing. Some ear protection and eye protection, obviously. Whoops. Don't want to be making people deaf, and especially when you're remote, you get something stuck in your eyeball. That's not a good thing. So C-clamps, very useful. Either if you're gluing up knife handles, or glue, it's not glue, it's epoxy, but whatever. Or if you're clamping stuff together to achieve the same profile when you're rasping it, filing it, whatever. Very useful. Selection of drill bits, and I have at least 2 of the same size here. 1/8 inch for those, 2 3/16 and 2 1/4 inch, and as you can probably notice, those correlate with the 1/4 inch and the 1/8 inch correlate with the pin stock size, which is obviously very important. Some other chisels here, cold chisels. They're small. I got these primarily to if we need to do some marking or like decorative things along those lines, and that'll be handy and just for whatever. And we could also potentially forge this into something different if we needed to. When you're a blacksmith, you can do all kinds of stuff. Channel lock pliers, super useful. I use these all the time. Twisting smaller stock in the forge when it's heated up, or taking stuff out, holding stuff, whatever, what have you. Very useful. Selection of hammers. So when you don't have a huge budget, like a $200 per hammer sort of a deal, you have to kind of think about what you're doing. So I have a couple 3-pound hammers, and they're different styles. And then I have a 12-ounce ball peen and a 24-ounce ball peen. Obviously very important for peening. This is big enough to do some light forging even. I primarily got this one because it's got some nice crisp square edges, or a square face and crisp edges on the hammer, which is going to be kind of good. But I did want to get wood handles if at all possible, which is why this is the only one that's not. And the reason is because without exception, hammer handles, unless you buy a $200 custom hammer, need to be reshaped to be the most effective they can be and the most comfortable to use and all that kind of thing. I haven't done that because I want to teach the kids how to do that, because that's part of the whole process. So we'll be doing that before we start actually using them, so that's going to be awesome. Duct tape, because everybody needs duct tape. Knife sharpeners, because if you're making knives, you need to be able to sharpen them, obviously. Sandpaper, and this is going to be primarily for finishing handles, because with forging and this kind of thing, it's going to be minimally necessary for doing a finish on a knife blade, the way I hope to be able to work towards in making some knives here to start with. So this is primarily for the the wood or the natural antler or whatever we're going to be using for knife handles. That's primarily what that's for, following the rasps and that kind of thing that I just showed you. And then coming over here, come back to these in a minute, I have some steel stock that I'm taking. This is 4140 5/8 round, and then we have hot rolled mild 5/8 round, and finally 3/8 hot rolled mild steel. And this, the 4140, is going to be for chisels, punches, that kind of thing. And I actually have to grab a couple pieces of rebar here, because I've actually used I actually use a couple of punches that I've made out of rebar, and they work pretty decent for the price of rebar. Anyway, the 5/8 hot rolled round is for tong stock primarily, and the 3/8 primarily is for the rivets for the tongs. So that's kind of the rundown on that. And then we have additional scrap metal and that kind of things that we're going to be using. Oh, and I'm going to throw this into, this is a chunk of 1 3/4 4140 that we can do something with, something cool with. So this stuff, I purchased some inexpensive multi-tools, pocket knives, folding saws, and the reason I did this is because actually, which you probably didn't know this, a lot of what happens over there in Zimbabwe and stuff is funded through things like this, where you buy this for $5 or $7 at Walmart, take it over, and you can sell it at the local flea market / livestock market that they have over there. It's sort of a hybrid apparently, and you can sell it for 25 or whatever, more than you paid for it. And the reason you can do that is because US dollars are worth more over there. It's not that you're ripping anybody off or anything like that. So because Zimbabwe's economy is as bad as it is, people use a variety of currencies, including US dollars and South African rand and this kind of thing. But the US dollars by far are the most valuable. So this kind of thing has actually funded a lot of what goes on over there with HOHA and stuff like that. So that's what this is for, and hopefully you'll be able to sell this stuff and make a little bit of extra money for what's going on. So that's kind of the rundown on the whole thing. Oh, and then I also did, where did it go? I also bought a few simple first aid items because, as you can see, maybe I myself even need band-aids from time to time. A little antibiotic ointment, band-aids, gauze pads, different things like that. Nothing too fancy. Walmart didn't have knuckle bandages for some reason this time, so shame on you, Walmart, but maybe I can find some before I go. Anyway, that's the rundown. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Please subscribe and stay tuned for more videos, not from just this trip, but I really hope in the future, and it'll probably be a little while from now, but videos from Whunga and what we're doing over there, and then also, you know, in the future, who knows where next. So I really appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe and have a great day.